And we'll do a roll call.
Mr. Blanchett? Mr. Cleveland?
Here.
Rosanna Glenn?
Here. Here. Okay, first on our agenda is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion? Second? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Agenda is approved as is. Next up is approval of minutes from the March 23rd meeting. We had made some minor changes. Did everyone get a chance to review? Any discussion on the minutes from last meeting?
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Anyone second? Okay, Shannon, Ken, thank you. All in favor? All opposed? Okay, minutes approved as is. All right, we actually have two sections for public comments on the agenda today purposefully because there's going to be a lot of discussion. I wanted to give the public an opportunity to speak before we have discussions, and then afterwards at the end, if they had any additional comments they wanted to make after they heard everything, feel free to come and make additional comments. Just some rules for comments. If you can please come to our makeshift podium over here and speak into the microphone. Just push the button when you're speaking so that we can hear you. Try to limit your time to under 5 minutes if possible. And we won't be able to answer any questions, so this is just your statements that you would like to make. If you do have any questions, you can certainly ask them, and then we will get back to you with answers after the meeting. So at this time, is there anyone in the public who would like to step forward? Jason. And please state your name as well when you make your comment.
I'll try and remember that. Okay. Good evening, everybody. My name is Jason LeBlanc, and I'm the current president of the Cromwell Chill Soccer Club. It's with no small anxiety that we're preparing for the spring season because typically in the spring, when we're looking at playing for the season, we've had for the past 2 years multiple weeks in our seasons where we've had closures due to rain. Case in point, the fields have been closed this week already, and so we're already pushing back the start of our spring training because of rain closures. When this happens, we scramble to cancel practices or move games, and this affects kids from kindergarten all the way through high school, right? This has been an issue since my kids have been in the program, so for at least a decade and probably more. And it's with this in mind that I reviewed some of the prints and the comments from the building committee last week, and it occurred to me that options 2 and 3 present a unique opportunity for us to add a turf field out here for the school at a discount, because we would already have to spend money for a new grass field, and we could use that money for a turf field. Option 3 is even better because the way that the architects have it laid out, there's a parking lot around the field that already has lighting. So if they did it that way, we could have a state-of-the-art nighttime use turf field for the town, which would be great and also help with some of the cancellations and issues we've had. What would this cost? Not even touching upon the maintenance savings for not having to mow weekly, paint the lines bi-weekly, spray pesticides, fix divots, fix dirt spots, seed, and do all this stuff for the fields that the maintenance guys have to do on a weekly basis anyway. Taking at $8.75 a square foot for a regulation size turf field to install a new turf field would be about $837,000, right? At $2.30 a square foot for a similarly sized grass field, it would be about $220,000, right? The difference between these two is $617,000, which when you do the math comes out to a 25% or potentially 25% savings or discount. So at cost, we could get a turf field if it's done in conjunction with this building project, if we do options 2 and 3, right? It's not often that as a community that we can upgrade our facility like this at such a huge discount, right? So I strongly urge this committee to consider changing the project scope to add a turf field if you choose option 2 and 3. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Jason. Are there any other public comments? We did have a few that were turned in through our email and online submittal form that I'm going to read as well. The first one is from Rosario DeStefano. She writes, I strongly support the addition of a new turf field. In general, having been involved in travel and premier soccer with some of my kids for a few years now, I've had a chance to compare Cromwell's fields to many other towns, and in general, we're at the bottom of the list in my opinion. There have been springs when the kids in town have barely played because of the constant field closures due to rain, etc. We could use an upgrade to all our fields, but getting a new field at CMS would certainly be a good start. Thank you. Next submittal was from Heidi Newman-Venetinier. Good day. As a member of the Cromwell community and a parent of a child who will be attending Cromwell Middle School, I would prefer that the town build a new school instead of renovating as new. There are several reasons for my preference. First and foremost, there would be less of a risk for the students and staff to be exposed to asbestos during the project. Second, the school would be a true model of 21st century learning, created with not only today's students in mind, but also students who will be attending for years to come. Thirdly, the amount of time for the project would be much less. Finally, the school would be a building that could host community events. Please read. Okay, that was it. And then the last one is from Danielle Libera-Tenska. She's the owner and the director of Company in Tempo. They are a music theater and dance company. Dear CMS Building Committee, Company in Tempo has been a business in Cromwell for over 30 years, supporting, encouraging, and teaching the performing arts to our community, with the majority of our students being Cromwell youth. Booking performance space is a yearly obstacle for us. We hold performances that range anywhere from 100 to 600 audience members, students, and we require certain lighting and sound capabilities. I am offering my perspective on the auditorium needs as a community member, Cromwell business owner, and supporter of the arts in town. Regarding size of the auditoriums, it is important for Company in Temple to give our students the experience of being both performers and audience members if their roles allow. This requires a need for a large auditorium, but it also allows students to watch their peers rather than being isolated backstage for a long period of time. For our largest performances in June, we book out of town because Cromwell does not have a big enough auditorium to accommodate this experience for our student body. This unfortunately means higher rental fees, which ultimately gets passed on to our students' families. Regarding lighting and sound capabilities, while Cromwell High School has the technical capabilities that Cromwell Middle School does not, it is often booked with its own events and can be difficult to get into. Using the current CMS auditorium would be too costly for us due to the need to bring in, as in rent, all the needed lighting and sound equipment. The technical aspects of a new auditorium are important. In regards to the need of a backstage space, for our musicals, we have substantial set pieces which require a lot of space backstage. From watching the CMS musicals over the years, I gather that they need about the same amount of space. Set pieces are generally large and need to be moved on and off stage quickly with lots of bodies entering and exiting at the same time. Consideration of a large backstage space with wings would help the ease of storage as well as cast member safety. Another thing to consider with backstage space is changing areas and crossover space. Students need areas that they can easily use as dressing rooms or holding areas while waiting to go on stage. They also need to be able to cross over to the other side of the stage. This either requires a legitimate crossover space behind the back curtain or hallway directly behind the stage area. She goes on to list the company and temple yearly performances. There's recitals in May, end of year performances in June, summer musical in July and August, and then a musical in November. If it was more convenient to do so, we would add more performance opportunities for our students. We limit it because it's tough to get the space. We're very appreciative of the space that our town currently has, as well as the privilege to use it. With the talk of a new space being created, I appreciate your time considering my input, and I would be happy to have further discussions about auditorium needs that would serve both the middle school and the community as a whole. And that was it for submitted comments. All right, next on the agenda is an update from me. So actually I wrote down notes this time, all prepared. Just before I start with my notes, I did want to take a moment to just give everyone a really big thank you for all the hard work and dedication that's been going on the past week or two. It's been absolutely amazing and a privilege to work with everyone. I know that it took a lot of personal time and a lot of stress to get to this point where we are today to actually be able to have this conversation. I want to thank Tecton for continuously amending your presentations and your plans to suit our always changing needs, I should say. All the time you've been devoting evenings and coming out, I really do appreciate that. Appreciate your client focus and sense of urgency in these efforts. Thank you. Also want to thank Lisa, who's keeping us sane. Thank you for dealing with all our emails back and forth. And I actually want to acknowledge our communications subcommittee, who's been outstanding this past week, working nonstop to get our social media and website up and running. A lot of you have no visibility, really, minimal visibility to what's been going on there, but they've literally been working nonstop to get all of this going. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And it looks fabulous. If you haven't looked at the website, please go look at the website. It's slick. I love it. Facebook page, same thing. A lot of great information. And our website already got like 100 followers within like less than a day. It's amazing. So thank you. On that note, Communications Subcommittee began meeting this week. The committee has 4 presentations planned in the next week, one to the ECS West PTO, the Cromwell Democratic Town Committee, the Cromwell Republican Town Committee, and the Cromwell Girl Scouts Service Unit leaders. The committee is preparing the website, a presentation, a white paper, frequently asked questions, and updating social media accounts and support these activities. And they look slick, I gotta tell you, very professional, I love it. On Monday, the building committee was invited to Colchester Middle School to view their renovated as new facility. The middle school opted to build a brand new 2-story facility in the middle of their campus, renovating older sections. Unlike Cromwell, Colchester's campus was oversized for their middle school, so they had a lot of square footage that they could work with. Their building, which they claim came in $5 million under their initial cost projections, has all of the amenities and space required for an optimally functioning middle school. It was beautiful. It's a really beautiful school, very slick. The committee took a lot of notes. We asked a lot of questions. We were able to put that visual to some of the drawings that Tectons provided. And I think one thing we can all agree on was that the addition of that natural light was just outstanding. It was a complete game changer to the atmosphere and that comfort in the building. It was amazing just having that light everywhere you went. You don't realize that you need it until you feel it, and you're like, wow, what a difference. Just your attitude, you're more, people are more positive. It's just amazing. And then today, the last thing I wanted to mention was that I attended a special meeting of the town council this afternoon. Tony Salvatore, our Cromwell town manager, and the town attorney drafted a charge for this building committee. I gave each one of you a copy of it. And I actually got to give one to, oh, you're right there, yep. They reviewed and approved it. So this is our official resolution for creating the school building committee. One of the items we're able to do is create our own bylaws, which we have. We're not going to vote on those today, though. So next week, at our next meeting, we will review those bylaws and approve them. Those were approved by Tony and the attorney, the bylaws. So all that was the end of my notes. Now the fun part. Next on the agenda is the building committee review of Tecton proposals and possible action to select new versus renovation option. So, do you want to present your updated? And just remind anyone, if you do have a question, please turn your microphones on to ask the question so we can all hear it. Thanks.
Those are the most recent.
The most recent, okay. More recent than the last one. Okay.
I don't know if I'll be picked up. So a lot of the information was already included in the one that I circulated earlier today, but as we moved through preparing the presentation, we refined some of the numbers so that it could be more accurate. So, can I move this? Let's see. There. Okay, so the presentation is not going to recap all of what we talked about at the last meeting. It's going to highlight everything that you asked and how we responded to you. So option 1R is renovate the existing. So there's 3 options that we had presented last time. You'll see a revision to each of the options. This is the first one is renovate the existing with limited additions. So that the ask was go back and look at the existing building, take the educational specifications, see what you can fit in it, logically without moving, reinventing the entire interior space. Tell us what's left, what you couldn't fit, and here it is. So on the left side is a color-coded plan. It shows, it indicates all the various different uses similar to the other 2 plans you'll see. Yellow is special ed, blue is basic, typical classrooms. Darker blues, science, the kind of the beigeish orange is all the auditorium, student dining, those kinds of things. So long story short, we've tried to fill every square inch of the building as it existed. And where we fell short is there's some spaces in the administrative area totaling, things like additional offices, some meeting areas, some storage, totaling 980 square feet. So we could not fit that in. The career technical, even though you have spaces today, we took those for science. So we started with the core academics and populated the building. So we couldn't fit about 2,700 square feet of the career technical, robotics, programs, things like that, and the ed spec. The other components, building services, we fell a bit short on various different toilet rooms, storage, mechanical spaces that were all listed in the ed spec. Obviously, your building functions today. but nonetheless, we could not fit those into the footprint on the main and upper floor plan and partial basement plan. So main floor plan, second floor of the locker rooms, and then this is the partial basement. So we totaled that at 2,000. The fitness room, we didn't fit. And then central office basically is programmed, total program space for the central office is 5,590. We left them where they are today, which is 2,100 square feet, and you fall short about 3,490, so 3,500 square feet. So when you total all this up, it's about 9,600 square feet that you would essentially have to, if you wanted to meet the ed spec in its exact form, meet the ed spec as best you can, you would have to add that space to this building. And you say, why can't you fit it? It's because of things like, see all the white on the plan? You know, there's spaces that we just can't, utilize for usable space, for program space. So that was kind of the assignment. This is the net result of that. So I think it just proves out that, there are some inefficiencies in the existing building that you just have to consider. So it's not to say that you have to get every single educational specification component in this building, but if you want to compare apples to apples along all three options, this is the shortfall. So some of the other pieces that you need to keep in mind when comparing the options. So we dug a little deeper with Antonia's help. She's the one that put this plan together, but the average classroom size is about 700 square feet. Okay, so what I mean by we tried to fit all of the educational spec components. Some were a little bit larger, some were a little bit smaller. Classrooms were on average 700. So you have some that are in the 680, some that are in the 740, some of that are in the 710. Your target, I believe, was around 800. Okay. Science and prep rooms, just because it was the nature of a test fitting, they're sporadic. Like you got 2 in the top left, you got 2 down at the bottom. We tried to get them as close as we could to classrooms, but the fact of the matter is the core classrooms that you need just don't fit, within this existing space if you want to start infusing some specialized education adjacent to the classrooms. The general lack of staff support spaces and poor distribution, among the classroom wings was another challenge or an observation. Obviously, you see all the blue. We tried to maximize it with the classroom cores. Things like all-inclusive toilets, they exist. They're just not well distributed, so that's another piece that you need to kind of keep in mind. The general lack of and distribution of toilet rooms for staff and students overall, it's kind of live with what you have today. And then there are some spaces that are above the educational spec as well. Not by much, but there's some in here that also contribute in the opposite fashion to that efficiency. So that, in summary, is the 2 slides that we had on our first ask. And I know there's this, I realized I wasn't quite sure in the PDF that I circulated if you were able to read the numbers. You should be able to. We revamped the kind of detailed spreadsheet so that anybody that loves numbers, they can print all 3 and compare them. Because what we did is we wanted to make sure it's consistent across the board so that you can understand the differences. So what we did is this is the population projection. The ed spec is 83,313. So that was revised on whatever day that was, 2 days ago. So that's the latest and greatest. Your existing building square footage changed a little bit from our last presentation because we actually took the existing drawings, measured the ground level, the upper level, and the lower level, so that number is an accurate, basically gross square foot of the building. So the other components that we changed, they're pretty much the same. We've refined their description and maybe added a few more details. Under site improvements, what we did, and I have the same detail for the central office. We wanted to separate middle school from central office, so we did in fact do that. So the Site improvement acreage, it dropped down a little bit for the schools, and we attributed about an acre to the central office because we feel that's appropriate. Same thing with parking. It's at 215 across all three options for 215 spaces for the schools, and I think I have 25 for the central office. And then the square foot numbers for the renovation of the basement, we dropped down as far as the cost per square foot. You're still gonna have to address it because it's there. You're gonna have to add things like emergency lighting, life safety, those kinds of things. So all those kinds of little things add up, and that was one of the asks to make sure that we look at soup to nuts for all the options. So we did. So we added those pieces. We added that 6,100 square feet for the school that we could not fit in the building, and that test fit that we just went through. So you did all the math, you do all of that, you look at the portables, the phased moving costs, there's gonna be some labor efforts. We looked back through some of our previous projects to see what some of these true costs were. They're not significant numbers, but they do add up. So there's things like if you have multiple phases in a project, well, you have moving costs every time you do that. So those things tend to add up if you have 8 phases in a complex occupied phase renovation. So we captured pretty much everything. And then that's your total project cost in the deep green. And then you have the reimbursable calculations. And we were asked to look at, so you get 49.64 for a renovation, right? Then you have to, because there's 2 roofs, a roof in this portion and a roof in this portion that are about 10, 11, maybe 12 years old at the time of grant application. So they're gonna, if you got money from the state on those re-roofs, they're gonna prorate and say, okay, they're gonna kind of ding you for some of that reimbursement because they're saying, well, you're taking it down before it's, the 20 years is up. So I did a calculation that's, takes that into account down here. You'll see reimbursement adjustment for roofs. I allocated, it's not a significant number, but it's a number that's gonna come off of your reimbursement. Then we adjusted for an auditorium. We circulated the description. I'm not sure if it made it to everybody, but the way that they reimburse for auditorium spaces is 50% of the seating area. So we did that calculation so that it's across the board consistent. And that's basically a deduction from your reimbursement from the state. And then there's things called ineligibles in a project that we like to carry. That's kind of it's a conservative approach. It's a safety number because there are gonna be things that are ineligible that you'll have to pay for. We found that to range anywhere from basically at 1% up to 4%. There's 4% there. So our approach is always to be kind of, fiscally prudent and responsible with the numbers that we present. And that's kind of how we reassembled and modified this chart. So at the bottom, the total cost to Cromwell is, I can't see it, 33.8. So I won't go over each one of those sheets in that level of detail, but that's how they're all set up. So now we're on to option 2R. Should I stop there? Does anybody have any questions on option 1R? Yep.
Your numbers, are they based on when this is going to go out to bid?
Yeah, so these are kind of order of magnitude costs that have served us really well over our history. What's going to happen is there'll be an independent cost estimator that's going to provide a uniform cost estimate, and the requirement for the state grant application is you have to escalate it to the midpoint of construction, and that's what these are intended to do. But that's very difficult these days with all that's happening. So the answer is to the midpoint of construction, if the state asks. Is that good? Anybody else got any questions on option 1R? Okay. Okay. Option 2R, we'll start with site plans. They're really just modifications based on the comments that we heard collectively from the building committee and then maybe some public comment. One of them was further separation of bus and parent. And orange could be bus and blue could be parent, or you could vice versa them. But at any rate, what we tried to do is extend in each of the options you'll see, we tried to extend the queue lines to get the the queuing off the streets. So that, I believe we accomplished here. We kind of clarified the separation. In practical purposes, you still have during the day or for community events, you have a full loop road. So there's pretty good circulation when you're not having to deal and operate as a school during the, drop off during the morning and after dismissal. Number two, small item, but an item that's important nonetheless, we were asked to take a look at, so we just indicate slightly wider so that you can have two exits, left and right turn out, out to Gear Street. We know you just put in sidewalks, so we're trying to go, we think we can fit it on the other side and not disrupt work that's just been completed. There was discussion about an outdoor amphitheater, so we wanted to make sure we showed it. We do here. That is, and as we get into the floor plan, that's immediately adjacent to the interior space. That's a breakout area, which is right behind you. So I would be standing in one of the band rooms. The other music room would be to my left. From the brick columns over would be kind of like breakout space for the students if they had, a smaller, if they wanted to practice. And then beyond that glass would be the outdoor amphitheater. Again, this option is the 55%, keep 55%, add 45%. So that's why you see such a significant addition. We're pushing this one to the max. It's kind of the inverse of what you saw on option 1. Item 4 is we preserve the separate entry to central office with dedicated parking. So we just wanted to make sure that that was clearly pointed out. It's on the, that would be the east end of the existing building. The floor plan, we corrected some missing science rooms on the second floor. We, with the revised ed spec, we also redistributed the revised educational program. They added, there was an addition of a health classroom and a few math reading intervention rooms, about, I think they were 600 square feet. So all of those are shown in yellow and been properly redistributed throughout the plan. We adjusted the plan to make sure that there's some toilet cores next to some of the more public facing, community facing program elements. We, as I mentioned, adjusted the plan for the proper number of science classrooms and then clarified the courtyards and outdoor court. Again, you mentioned natural daylight and the importance of it. You made a comment at the last building committee meeting where, making sure that we maintain that. So we did maintain it and we just improved it a little bit in a modest fashion so that we had natural daylight to all the programmable educational space and also the media center. So some modest modifications to the floor plan, but I think they're important nonetheless. So you know the format. I'm going to point out the differences. The square footages are the differences because we maximized the 55-45, right? There is now a premium for phased work. Actually, there is in option 1 as well. But there's a premium to the phased renovation, occupied phased renovation work that we wanted to detail. Eddie had pointed that out at the last meeting as well. There's not many other modifications to this other than some modifications to the moving costs and things like that because we have less phases than the first option. And I think, yeah. Any questions on option 2 or 2R? Sure.
In option 2R, is the nurse and guidance counseling area going to be as part of that admin section?
Yeah. So
And that meets the square footage in the ed specs?
it does. Trying to go from memory, it's I think almost 4,000 plus it meets the ed spec.
Okay.
We just didn't add as many labels as the other plans did, but
Okay.
that square footage, it actually consumed the last few rooms on existing, I think it's the band room, to get to that square footage, so.
Okay,
Answer
thank you.
is yes, yep, yep.
I know a big concern is the soccer field. in what phase would you be able to bring that soccer field back?
Did you cheat on, did I print that out?
On the previous slide, it shows the soccer field in the back.
I have, I could show, I guess it's more related to the new. We think you can actually, on option 2, if we can sacrifice, see that dotted, the temp modulars that are back there now? If those can be discarded first, we think we could, in a temporary fashion, rotate the field. And it may not be the best orientation. I haven't really checked what the proper orientation for soccer would be, but we could rotate it and fit it in this location in a temporary fashion while we're doing the work. There's room enough to do it. So, does that answer that question? Yep.
So there's room even with that baseball field above it, 'cause it looks like it's sitting on the
Well, they would
base-
overlap, certainly. Yep.
They would overlap.
Yeah, and I guess my excuse used to be that they used to be 2 different seasons, but now that they have spring soccer, I don't know how well. So, yeah, they would have to overlap. They do modestly now. In fact, I was looking on the way in, I guess there's a slightly, this is the largest regulation soccer field. I'm not quite sure what size what size fields we need there. We can take that offline and I can make sure that we're showing the accurate one. This one is regulation based on, I think, high school, so I can get the dimensions, but we think you can fit it in a temporary fashion, yep. I don't know if you're taking, okay, so we may have to wait for public comment for the elements, okay.
Then one of the concerns that we had was safety, and we had talked about the admin area. Would there be limited visibility in this configuration with admin and seeing like who's coming in, and because the parking lots are not directly in front?
Yeah.
Is there a way to correct that, like through glass windows or anything like that, or is it just natural structure of it?
Yeah, as if this was the option and as it unfolded, one of the recommendations would be to kind of take some program elements that don't necessarily have to be in one suite and start looking at placing them in other portions of the building that are still front-facing to the public side. We've done that an awful lot. I don't know if it's a remote office or guidance or something that may be better served closer to the students. That also is an occupied office the majority of the day, splitting them up and putting them there. But as it exists today, yes, there's an obstacle there that is the existing cafeteria that isn't ideal in this scenario. Yeah.
Ken, you had a question about locker rooms last time. Did we address the locker room? I forgot what the issue was last week.
So the existing locker rooms they're basically like a split level, and there is accessibility. They're served by an elevator. But if we're looking for in a school that's accessible and inclusive, having a handicapped student use an elevator, that's not very inclusive.
So a couple things so this is representing that we're just leaving the stacked program elements as shown. There's a couple things that we talked about actually at one point during one of the tours was possibly reclaiming one side of the gymnasium could be an option for some of the lockers and facilities to support it, because you don't necessarily, that gymnasium was sized because it was a high school, so you don't necessarily need all of that space to have it function properly, both for middle school community events, but also for the educational curriculum. So that could be an option, and or the other option could be to disregard or take out the second floor and then expand out the back to get you your proper square footage. Or maybe it could be a combination of reclaiming some space and using reworking this so that it's all at grade. But for purposes of this option, yeah, we left it as is. There's really no real good solution there, because it's split. If one was down and one was up, I could say we could we could use the second floor for like a mechanical space and expand or rework things, but neither one gives you, access at grade level, unfortunately. Any other questions on 2?
The auditorium, were you able to check on the accessibility of the?
I do, and I have a slide kind of on the tail end of this presentation. It's, so long story short, it's 1 in 20, so you're fine. It's 36-inch change in elevation and about 60 feet, so yeah, that's really a non-issue. I mean, it's compliant at 1 in 20, which is great, which means it's no railings, there's a difference between, ramps are 1 in 12 pitch, and 1 in 20 is what you want, so that you don't need railings or anything like that. So, so that's a good ratio to have.
On the financials, could you just flip to that
Sure.
slide?
Yep.
Was there consideration, and I think there was, but we had talked last time about, retrofitting mechanicals, right, and having to maintain them, and are they all going to fit together? How did we account for that?
So we did account for it. Our renovation number we feel is appropriate for, it's set at 385. And we also now included, because there will be work for most likely some mechanicals, some ductwork, some piping in the basement. So we've captured that square footage and a cost associated with that.
Okay.
So we feel confident that from an order of magnitude perspective, we've captured that. Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this?
On to 3.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. 3R. So site plan, the building orientation stayed pretty much the same, but what we did is, item 1 is and you'll see it in the floor plans, we were asked to take another look at the location of the gym, auditorium, cafeteria arrangement. So we put the gym down here next to the cafeteria, moved the auditorium up here. And with that came along the stage, the band room, and the associated, what we would recommend as the associated support spaces. Put the stage so that you could have an indoor-outdoor stage. That was a request last time. And then we located an outdoor amphitheater that we talked about at the last meeting. So that's item 1. The item 2 we already talked about in the previous 2 options, but expanded double exit lane to gear. 3, we've now shown, because at the last meeting we questioned, does it want to be connected? Does central office want to be connected, or is a freestanding building to the middle school? So we've connected it. That's up here, and that's on square footage. That about 5,000 square foot. We feel that because this is the media center here, we feel it's not programmable or assignable square footage, but an outdoor kind of reading area immediately adjacent to the media center made a lot of sense, because when you walk in the main entry, you're going to see right through this space out into this basically protected courtyard. It's an ideal setting for the students. And then this is so similar to option 2. We looked at locating a temporary soccer field to the north of where we're building. If you rotated and turned it, could it fit, and what would you need to do? And I have another view that shows more of this, but we show it obviously it would sit on that baseball field. And then so you'd have to modify the access drive, and you could potentially clear out that area so that you don't lose the use of it. You could start the work there, build a temporary field, then build your building, and then eventually, when things are finished here and you're finishing up, you could put your final field located there. So that's the site plan. As far as the building modifications, similar and consistent with option 2, we had revisions to the ed specs, so we had to redistribute the specialized ed, the health classrooms. We feel like there's a better dispersion throughout the floor plan now. We relocated, so we flipped the auditorium up here, so you have the auditorium, you have the stage, you have the supporting flanking storage control rooms and support spaces, and then you have band chorus, storage, office, and keyboard all immediately adjacent to it. So it's a pretty good adjacency relationship or block. So that flipped to the north of the plan, and then we flipped gymnasium down to the south, and we think this potentially, if there's a desire to have a connection, even if it's just supporting space, you often get cafeteria setting up kind of tables, chairs, and support, food and whatnot to support whatever events are happening in the gymnasium. So this adjacency works pretty well. You still have the ability to enter directly into those spaces through those corridors so that you could lock off and have good separation of the building, so there's no real security issues, and you can also kind of separate the mechanicals, so you save on energy efficiency as well. And then the core classrooms, there was minor revisions and modifications as we kind of redistributed some of the yellow specialized ed. We just refined some of the other spaces, really just their locations, nothing major. So similar cost table to the previous two options. The obvious modification is there's no renovation costs or anything like that. We've assigned the new building costs. There's no premium phased work in an occupied building. We've adjusted the whole building and whole building abatement numbers so that they're more reflective of just taking down a large building after this building is built. So I think these are all reflective of the scope. There's no portable lease costs, moving costs, or anything like that that are premium to this option. The biggest delta in this particular option is the 10% change in reimbursement. So similar adjustments to the reimbursement for the roof on the auditorium. So let's see. Any questions on option 3 before we go to that summary slide?
What's the difference in the size of the auditorium with option 3 versus option 2, the one we have now? Do you have that?
So the proposed, I think it's 3750 in the ed spec. I have it in my. So the one in the new is exactly.
And I'd ask how that compares to our current one, just so we can mentally put it in perspective.
Yeah. Bear with me a second. I mean, I know they're close, but I want to give you the exacts. Okay, because the auditorium changed. The latest version of the ed spec, which we received on 3/28, has the auditorium at 3,500 square feet, and that's what's shown on the new. The existing. Can you read it from your PDF? I got it right here. No. Hold on. Got it. 3770. Yeah. Okay. So it's a 270 square foot difference.
Is that square footage difference due to the added control room and everything, or
Nope,
just?
that's purely the box, if you will, of the auditorium.
Okay.
And just because we would leave what's there, we wouldn't take, 270 square feet away from the existing space, we would just leave it. So that's some of the give and take with the renovate as new, is you kind of have to leave some of the walls there.
How would you add that control room to the option 2?
The control room would flank,
Would it be in the back, or would it be on the side, or?
it'd be on the side. So there's 2 mechanical rooms down here and storage rooms that are now, I think, student rooms during the day. I'm not sure exactly their names.
Yeah.
Those would be reclaimed. They were originally control and support rooms for the auditorium
So
during the original
So the
design.
control room, the people in there would not have visibility to the actual auditorium? It'd be that's-
You could probably create it, yeah. Typically, well, not typically, in some instances, you want the control room either towards the rear so that they can see. Some want them up closer to the stage. So that could be negotiated, modified in the plan.
Such often control rooms don't even count.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're more camera driven now,
Screen in there that don't be able to see all the action.
And and then you would add on to the back of the auditorium to create that extra backstage space? Is that
For the
option 2?
Option 2, you kind of live with what you have,
So you wouldn't
More.
be able to expand that?
more or less. No, I drew over it, so,
Yeah.
I don't know how you get out of this thing. Hold on a second. This is probably a better plan. So so the stage here is bigger than what's in the ed spec, right? So this is 1355.
Yeah.
And I think the ed spec now is around 800 or 900 square feet. So that delta gives you the difference. But if you were to go with this option on an ed spec when it's listing out those spaces, chances are you would either say, okay, I'll take this corner for the control or find another spot. It's kind of, when you're dealing with larger existing spaces, you're not going to take down those walls because typically those walls are either structural or forming the space.
So for option 3, you'd also have an 800 square foot stage, but then you'd have an additional backstage area?
Nope, I have exactly what's on the ed spec. I've got a stage and a storage support room. I've got an auditorium, stage, storage, and control room. If they needed to be modified.
So auditorium stage is 950 square feet. Storage is 600 square feet. So that 950 square feet is the regular stage inclusive of the backstage, is my guess.
Right.
And we're saying today's stage is 1,300? So we actually have more space today.
You do? Yep.
So why don't we have a backstage today?
No one,
I'm so
people are,
confused.
no, it's okay. People are watching and I know it's terrible, but the setup, if you're not talking into the mic, they
Oh,
can't hear.
sorry.
Sorry, Jeff.
Yep,
It's
no
not-
problem.
It's by
No
nature.
problem.
That's why I needed it.
Okay, appreciate it. Yeah.
We don't have that.
So the answer is yes. Your existing stage is larger than what your ed spec, your current ed spec as of 328 calls for. It could change.
Okay.
Okay.
It's not, something doesn't make sense in my head, but I'll figure it out. Okay.
Sure.
Question on option 3. Are there all-inclusive toilets near the auditorium area for public use, or is it only behind the kind of like closed-off educational wing?
So there this is gonna be fun. So, toilets there that show boys and girls that have room to have all-inclusive toilets should we desire them in that location. So when you see a toilet core that shows a bunch of lines, those are kind of indicating kind of numbers of fixtures and things like that. The ideal setup would be that you would have, boys, girls, all inclusive, gender neutral, and probably a janitor. You want to get all of your plumbing facilities and plumbing in that core. So when you see blocks like that, you could basically assume, whether or not it's specifically calling it out, you can assume that that's where those would live. Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions on number 3? There's a summary slide I can get to that hopefully will put this all together here. All right, so there's a lot of numbers and a lot of text on here, but basically what you have is I simplified kind of the detailed spreadsheet, right, to site improvement, building improvements. You get a subtotal for your construction costs, because typically when you're talking about projects, you're talking about hard costs and soft costs. So hard costs are construction costs, soft costs are here. Then there's some other variances, which are all your phasings and your moving pieces that I wanted to call out specifically. You get a total project cost, which is 60.5, 59, 56 when you add all those up. You take out the state reimbursement, and I already did all the other math as far as the drops for the roofs and things like that. So it's just a simplified chart here, so that you can easily look at the differences, the cost differential. So, when you start to equalize and really look at the detail, and we have a little bit more to go. When you're renovating, comprehensively renovating an existing building, there's not a significant amount of savings compared to new. There is a savings, but it's not significant when you start adding up everything. So, but if people, there's still a difference. There's $1.9 million of difference between option 3, which is new, and option 1, which is renovate. When you look at this one, it's 2.9. Okay, so felt like that was a decent summary slide. Any questions on that one? Okay, so this is central office, and I think you guys are just gonna have to. I have the spreadsheets that that we went through for the schools, but this is the summary slide. Much smaller costs, obviously, because the square footage is far less, but it's around that 55 to 6,000 square foot. The only real differences, in all the options is option 3 is all new, option 2 is all renovation because we can fit it in the east side of the building, and option 1 is a combination of leaving what they have and adding to it to get to that program of 5,900. That's where we kind of started the presentation. So that's central office. The way the state reimbursement works there, it's 50% of what you would get. So that's baked into the numbers. And that's a sign that I should go to the next slide. So a couple of things just to, numbers aside, they're obviously important, but other things to consider when you're thinking through all this is expected duration of construction. We got 36 to 48 for option 1, 36 for 2, and 2 years for option 3. And the only reason why I say 2 years for option 3, chances are they could build that in 18 months, but you still got to tear down this. You got to, put parking in, put the fields in. So there's some time there. So these are estimated or expected based on our experience. So there's a pretty significant difference in the time frame here. The square footages I just totaled, and that's in the detail. So the reason why I put that out there is because obviously with a new building you can get pretty efficient, right? You get as efficient as you need to get, and in others you're leaving things like basements and things like that you just don't make sense to take out of the square footage. I put OSCGNR in the next line just because you should be aware. If you're over your allowable, you know, you're going to seek some space waivers and things like that. It's possible, not likely maybe. I don't know. There's a whole lot going on with the state. So you should just need to know that with certain ones, you're compliant or you might need to do a space waiver. 21st century educational improvements, and, you know, I guess anybody could argue and pick these apart, but the reality is you can maximize your opportunities with a new. It's pretty obvious. Your chances to get to 21st century are really significantly improved than a renovate as new, because that's completely reinventing the building. And in option one, you still can get there. There's things that are in your way as far as adjacency relationships that just aren't possible. Phasing and logistics, Eddie talked about this last time, about 6 to 8 phases in option one, 3 phases in option two, and 2 phases in the new build, which is build new, move the students in, demo, and finish. Operating costs, just obvious, and I have some numbers that kind of prove this one out as far as these are really related to the efficiencies of the building, and Antonia did a little bit more detail on that to show you. You asked about life cycle costing, so we have some data, and if you want to come up, and you'll have to talk like this, but obviously, you know, the initial construction cost is a small percentage of, let's see, will this work? There it is. And the future operating costs are obviously hidden, and then these are just some of the things that we would look at as far as what we can do to improve life cycle costing, site issues, obviously unforeseen conditions of new and existing, and then the functional age. You really need to think about that, what you end up with at the end. And that's a little bit of an unfair kind of statement, but somewhat true, is you'll still have, you know, even though you renovate it as new, you still have parts of the building that are a certain number of years old. So do you want to speak to these two?
So we just modeled a few, we call them these just sketchy white model renderings of what the existing building could be compared to the new, and you know, that the renovate as new is somewhat in the middle. So what you're looking at here, we did some sun studies because we thought that, you know, on the previous slide we talked about building orientation being something that is considerably harder to change when you've already got a building in place. But if you're building new, you have a real opportunity to be able to maximize your sustainability, your footprint, all of the above. So what we did is we took today at 8:30 in the morning and we ran a solar study over the models to look at where the classrooms are located and if they are in shadow. And so you can see in the existing, you've got some classrooms that are in shadow, some classrooms that are receiving that sunlight straight in. So that might lead to some issues like glare, some overactive HVAC systems to try to calm that solar infiltration down. But in the new construction, you're running parallel. Your classrooms are running parallel to the angle, to the direction the sun is coming from, and so you just have ambient light in those spaces, which is a lot better. And same in the afternoon, just the reverse. So now the sun's going the other way, and you've got classrooms now on the other side of your existing building that are in shade, classrooms on the other side that are receiving that direct sunlight. But in the new scheme, the way it's oriented, you have classrooms just receiving that ambient light. So all throughout the day, you have really comfortable spaces with the natural light and natural sun. Just next is here.
Yeah, oh yeah, I didn't tell you.
Okay. Yeah, so we talked through that, so just considering glare and shadow impacts. Considerations for the building envelope is another key point. There's this metric called form factors, and the form factor just gives you a quick takeoff so that you can compare building footprints between existing and new and understand more or less how efficient the building will be. And there are a few different metrics. So you take, your general floor areas of the new in the orange and the existing in the blue. Your envelope area is the addition of all of your horizontal and vertical surfaces. So every time you have a wall or a roof plane, you're adding those areas together to come up with the envelope area. The volume is obviously just your square foot times your height to get to your building volume. And then what you start to do is you start to compare your building envelope and your heated floor area. And so that ratio gets you about a 10.8% heat loss form factor in the new and a little bit higher in the existing. So in other words, you're able to better conserve energy. You're losing less heat based on your building form and footprint in the new because it's more compact. And your surface to volume ratio is also lower. Generally, rule of thumb is if you're building on a more compact footprint and you're building 2 stories, 3 stories, you're gaining efficiencies there. And that proved itself out in the numbers. This is my favorite slide. Why does it matter? This is why we're all here, of course, right? Is student health, student thinking, and student performance. And we know that there's this integral relationship there. So if you start with student health, you can help improve their academic performance. And there's lots of research out there in the field of environmental psychology focused on specifically students in schools and how the built environment can impact their learning progress. And they found that it's as much as 25%. So by making some really smart decisions in the built environment, especially in brand new, as Jeff mentioned, there's a direct correlation to academic performance. Things like how natural daylight can improve math and reading scores. Things like if you encourage a sense of classroom neighborhoods and wayfinding and scale, you help middle schoolers feel this real sense of belonging, which at the middle school age is so very important. Things like ventilation rates can help students move through schoolwork tasks 8% faster. There's a study now with the direct outdoor air. If you have more air exchanges and you have that air not refiltering but constant supply of fresh filtered air, you reduce the carbon dioxide levels in the classroom and help improve that student focus. Taking too long?
No. I think you're there, right?
Yep, that's it.
Awesome. Thanks, Antonia. So I thought it was important to go through those examples. I guess the point of those few slides is that you have, in certain options, you have more ability to affect those things than others, right? So more to one of the building committee members' requests on kind of life cycle and value analysis. We put this slide together, and again, there's lots of numbers, but let me explain the first row here. So when you're looking at things, what we tried to do is think about like what key elements across all 3 options would you really be interested in looking at when you're trying to find out the true value. Forget about the day one cost, the true value, of that option. So when we talk about unforeseen conditions, conflicts, cost increases, it's a reality of a project of this size, right? When you're renovating a building, that can be anywhere from 4 to 7%. When you're renovating as new, because you're kind of reinventing it, there's less unforeseens, you're in the 3 to 5%. And in a new building, you should be, south of 1%, but we put 1 to 3. So if you take the median of each of those ranges and you just apply it to times the construction cost for that option, they add up kind of quick, right? So the reality is that you're going to see some conflicts, unforeseens that you didn't think you would run into in renovating existing buildings. So that's a risk, but it's also, we tried to put a cost to it. Is it exactly this? No, but it's going to be something like this. Okay. Second category is we labeled it costs that don't stay in the building. And for the CMs and the CMRs and the GCs, it's not necessarily, it's not a shot at the work. It's basically the longer that your project lasts, the more that you're going to spend in things that don't stay with the building. You know, temporary trailers for all the contractors, people that are on site. So when you start comparing 48 months to 36 months to 24 months, I tried to put a number to it. So I went back and looked at our 4 or 5 of our current active projects, the percentages of general conditions, and did a calculation. And it obviously, the percentage changes. It's not apples to apples, but I tried to put a number to it. So obviously, if you're comparing a building construction project that's only going to last 2 years versus 4 years, there's clearly a savings. I tried to identify what that could be. Okay, and then there's also things like temporary facilities, field offices, all the other stuff that doesn't stay in the building, because they're broken into 2 different categories for those that are familiar with the construction industry and profession. So these are essentially very similar analyses, but I applied a number to it. And then the last one, and you know, there's a footnote there, but it's annual energy costs. So any of these buildings that file for a grant application have to meet the high performance building standards. So they have to meet a minimum energy standard. So it's not like we're going to design an inefficient building. But the fact of the matter is the historical numbers prove out, and quite honestly, most if not all of our projects moving forward are net zero, usually energy costs. But renovation projects are about $1.50 a square foot per year for energy costs, and new run about $1.25. So what does that mean for real dollars? If you just multiply that out over 10 years, the delta is anywhere from 376 to 467,000. So it starts to put some kind of math to some of the other things that you need to think about as you move through these options. And I think that's it.
Hey Jeff, that's really important. I'm sorry to interrupt, and Tommy, I'm sure is shaking his head. That's what we look at all the time, every day. We're looking at these costs to just keep our buildings running. Even when a building like Wix, everyone you would think that building was built 18 years ago. The amount of money now, 18 years later, that we're realizing that we're spending is a tremendous amount of money. If we start doing this immediately, it's only going to increase as time goes on. And that's what we're trying to battle right now. And I know Tommy's somewhere, I can't see him. So I don't know if Tommy, I think you all understand what it means, but just capitalizing on it so that you understand the amount of money that we spend on our buildings. If we knew we were going to go into a situation like this right off the bat. It's money thrown in the garbage. It drives me insane. But I'm sure you would feel the same way as taxpayers. I don't live here, and I see how much money we spend, and it makes me crazy because it could really go into educating our students or into your pockets as taxpayers.
And so you're talking about money you're spending at CMS?
I'm talking about schools in general. So like in this situation, at the high school, at all schools, all 4 schools, because our buildings are so old, we're spending so much money to keep them running, and doing the bare minimum of what we have to do, putting on the Band-Aid. So what Jeff is saying in renovation is new, chances are, because of what we're keeping, we're still going to have to continue to spend that money over time, because the building, whether we like it or not, the energy savings, whatever is going to save us the $3 million up front, we're going to be spending over time every year because we haven't updated. We're not using the most efficient.
Yeah, I think Antonia gave the example of analyzing the building envelope. We just know, I think, a little bit more now, or at least we look at more things today during design than we have in the past. And one of them is compact, efficient layouts. It's obviously optimizing the energy efficiency of the systems, but the fact of the matter is a more compact two-story building is going to be more efficient than a building that's one story spread over the land. It proves out time and time again. So those are things that you live with for the life of the building, which affect annual operating costs. That was kind of the exercise here. I know there was a lot of data behind it.
Just one
but-
quick question. So
Yep.
that bottom row, like the 1.5, 1.4, 1.0, that's for 10 years, right? So
Correct.
to get the annual cost, we would divide it by 10.
Correct, yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Yeah, that's what we've used for projections of late. Yep.
All right, and then quick question on the top 3 rows. That's the upfront cost of construction, right? Does that, or some of the unforeseen costs upfront? And is that part of, as we're going through the project, does that get reimbursement from the state? Is that eligible for
Yeah.
reimbursement? So that gets factored
Yeah,
in as well.
that's all, these are all within the context of the numbers that I had shown you. What I'm trying to illustrate here is that, if you have $100 to spend, in each of these options, you're going to leave only so much in what stays in the building. And it varies depending on what, all these factors, length of construction, multi-phasing, so those are I'm just trying to illustrate the differences between new versus renovated, new versus
You're
renovation.
basically adding value as you move from left to right.
Value stays in the building typically when you move left to right on the screen. The downside of that is on the other screen, it's the highest value versus, versus the other two.
Yep.
So, so we're not trying to put, guide anybody in any one direction. We're just trying to lay out, the implications of each option.
Okay.
I've got a question.
Sure.
Is this building eligible for Eversource rebates?
Typically, we get Eversource rebates. There's still an active program. In fact, they've enhanced it. In the past, the state has deducted that from the reimbursement you get back. I'm not quite sure where they stand on that now. I think they had changed over the last few years. They had changed their opinion on that and allowed it incentivized, allowed the community to take the incentive because not all communities were doing it. So it's really there for people who want to, take advantage of that incentive.
So the rebate, I'm just trying to compare these. If comparing option 1 to option 2 and option 3 for a rebate, I think logically you'd think you might get a higher rebate for option 3.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the last few projects. Yes, it's typically higher. You're in the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands with these rebates. So it's probably not bigger than some of these numbers, but it's significant. Yeah.
Sure.
Yep.
Does the committee have any other questions? Otherwise, we can have open discussion.
Jeff, just making sure on the probable cost summaries between the two screens, like you showed them differently in the middle school and central office, but right, the central office would be additive to the middle school cost, not embedded in.
That's correct.
Right, okay, just want to clarify. That's okay, it's way many screens ago.
Thanks.
It's back.
Hold on. Yes, you'd have to.
I think it was around 2 million something,
Yeah.
no matter what option you took.
Yeah, just keeping the
Right.
total number in mind.
Yes, it'd be this and one of those, if you so chose to do both. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, please.
To in my own mind, essentially the option 3 runs about $3 million more than option 2. If you take out these sort of costs that don't remain in the building that you've got here on the value analysis, that comes out to about $2 million. So a realistic cost differential, am I right, is I don't want to say just, is
In the
$1 million.
grand scheme.
I mean, because of all those other costs, the unforeseen circumstances, the things that don't stay in the building, if I take those all out, I'm really looking at just $1 million difference. Would that be a fair
If you,
assessment?
The value would be different.
Value, yeah, the
You'd
value.
lose 2 million in value.
the value,
Right.
yeah, is, approximately correct.
Okay.
Yeah, these numbers are closer than I've seen with other communities and other options because just that's how these worked out, because you have some, unique kind of challenges here where your building's exactly pretty close to what you need as far as a new building. So there's not a lot of like wiggle room to, like we said earlier in our first meeting, like there's not a lot of room to like move students around. So when you start factoring in all those challenges, they start to come a little closer together.
Well, and I see that, I mean, the overall cost is actually cheaper for the new school, 56 to 59.
Yeah, that's true. That's
And we're
something-
paying the state taxes too, so in a sense, we're paying for it either way.
Yeah, me too.
But which I just find interesting that it costs more to fix this old battleship than to build a new battleship.
It wouldn't if you had a place to move everybody out and stay there for a year and a half.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Are there any other questions?
Maybe just one more, just generally, the new ed spec. I actually saw some detail removed from here, so I just want to make sure these options include the outdoor amphitheater and potentially this outdoor, I guess, lecture area.
So
Were those just like drawing renditions, or were there some contemplation of costs in there as well?
they're covered on the costs. The dedicated outdoor amphitheater that has like seating was programmed, was modified, and I think put in the site descriptions in the ed spec.
Oh, maybe that. Okay,
That's
yeah.
probably why you might not.
Yeah, because I just wanted to kind of see how detailed that description was, for lack of a better word. So
I think Karen and I'm not. Roger LaFleur and others created it, so I think they moved it to the site description, right? The amphitheater.
I think it's in site improvements.
Okay. Yep.
okay, I'll look for it there.
Rosanna, can I just make a comment? Just as far as if you're wondering what happens now, Tecton will, hopefully will get, as soon as we get a decision, they're going to go back and add enough detail so that our cost estimator can provide a verification and more detailed cost estimate. So Tecton has until the April 8th, which is a Friday, so just about 2 weeks, to add more detail and prepare a project narrative to explain things like the amphitheater. What is that? Is it a sloped lawn? Is it built in? To add as much detail as possible. So again, we'll provide the plans and narrative to the cost estimator, and that cost estimator will start on April 11th.
The outdoor learning is on the bottom of page 6.
And then so after was it April 6th? Is that what you said? What was the date that they'd have it done by?
The Tecton's drawings and specs and narrative will be done April 8th.
April 8th. And then
on Friday, and then the following Monday, the 11th, we'll start the cost estimate.
Okay, that's with the independent estimator.
Yeah.
And then that would be ready for the 19th?
Yes.
Okay.
He thinks he still has 2 weeks, but it'll be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, about a week.
Any comments on the ed spec or anything we've heard or any? Jessica?
Just a couple quick comments here. I don't have a lot of questions because you answered, I know all of my questions from last week in this presentation, and a considerable amount of effort went into this, so thank you. I appreciate, I think you probably read our minds with the energy studies and trying to understand what the impact of a new school would be, on energy costs. So thank you for doing that too. So I think I know because I'm not one of the voting members here, but one thing that wasn't said today that I know has been talked about before, and I think since we have a larger audience as well, considering the timeline for the project. For the students that are going to be going through this construction phase, we're talking about the 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders that we have in our schools today that are at WIS. So an extended project, these are the same students that just spent a couple of years at home, for COVID purposes. So, in terms of length of project and disruption to learning, I think that's an important consideration for the committee. Of course, cost is a major factor here in what we're going to be getting out of it. But given that they're pretty close, it looks like we can think about some of those other decision factors as well. So
Yeah, that's a good
just
point.
wanted to say that.
That's a really good point. Because you could theoretically have a class that would enter the middle school at the beginning of construction, and they would leave and not even enjoy the school at all because they'll hit high school and the school will be done.
Something to just kind of add to that and disruption to students, something to think about in the renovate versus the new too is the loss of core spaces like the gym and the auditorium, right? And in addition to the learning loss our students have experienced, we also know there's social emotional challenges. We're talking about middle schoolers who that already is a challenge. And I think losing the outlets to the arts and athletics is another factor for us to consider when we're looking at timeline and what would be available to our students.
I did speak to a number of middle school teachers today, and even though we're not moving around during the construction, if it was a renovated new, it's still going to be right there. So it's still going to be full of noise. It's still going to be full of dust. It's still going to be, the parking lot it's still going to be a major interruption to learning. And for 3 years, you're right, there may be kids who go through 3 years of construction through their entire middle school experience. So that's another thing I think needs to be considered.
Would it be safe to say that option 1 is not really being considered at all?
Yes.
Can we agree with that, at least? Okay,
Yes.
safe to say. So we can focus on option 2 and 3.
Emphatically.
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, I mean, there's a laundry list there. That was not right. So we had, this week we talked about what our priority list was, and on our priority list, we talked about STEAM being at the top. I think both options would address the needs there. Safety, I think there's a concern with option 2 and safety. I feel for the admins who don't have that full visibility that they've been, wanting, that we have like at WIS, where they can actually see everyone coming in and kind of have that sense of security that someone nefarious, like that's my word these days, nefarious, isn't coming along. So that is one of my concerns with option 2. The natural light, I think, that was another thing we really liked. You're going to be limited with this side of the building with option 2 as well. You're not going to like blow through the roof to get sunlight, so it's going to be limited. So you're still going to have parts of the middle school that's going to be drab and dreary, and it's going to be one of the social areas, right, where your media center and your cafeteria. So you're spending a lot of time where the kids are being social, but you're being social in an area that's not naturally lit, I feel like they don't get the benefit that they deserve during those times. So, what was the fourth one? Classroom spaces. I'll look it up. I forgot. Not that one. This one. And the fourth one was HVAC, which I think they're going to be addressed either way. There's going to be inefficiencies with option 2 versus option 3, just because you have an old section of the building you're going to have to retrofit. Classroom sizes would be fine, I guess, either way. That was it for the top areas. So, I mean, what's everyone's thoughts? I'd like to have a discussion going. What are people thinking?
Okay, I don't want to leave you hanging. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm definitely personally, I'm leaning more towards the new. I guess I'm already kind of going past this decision, so to speak, and just making sure that as we make a decision, and part of it is informed, on the cost difference, as we either go through the design phase and whether things come up that increase the cost, or right up to the part of the grant, we modify the spec to say, some of the things we saw at Colchester too gave us some food for thought. Like, oh, okay, there's some outdoor seating outside of the lunchroom. That's nice. Now that in and of itself probably doesn't cost a lot. But if we think about, oh, well, then there was this, or what about that? And I don't want it to look like, okay, well, we went new and then we scope creeped it up, because I would argue that, well, hey, we could have taken this option with the reno as new too. So things like the soccer field, I don't think it's worth spending too much time talking about the merits of it now and for today for this decision, because you could argue, well, rather newer reno, we got to move that field, and maybe there's a better solution for it long term anyway. So, but things like that, I just want to make sure that it kind of goes on record that definitely this 36 million net and the 57 gross, plus the central office costs. We just want to make sure we're not kind of bound to that. People may have that number stuck in their head, but until we go through and to the referendum like that's the idea of the total cost. Until we get the grant, then we know for sure what the bottom line is. These help to guide estimates, but just as long as we have some kind of creative things to put in, between now and completion.
These numbers are just rough numbers, right? They're just used as a discussion point to kind of think
Roseanne,
of.
excuse me.
Karen.
You'll probably think of several things like the turf soccer fields, or developing, outside learning spaces more. And once you get through the referendum and everything's approved and you go through the design process, when you get ready to go to bid, you can have a series of alternates. Depending on what the bidding climate is, you might do really well. And so you get prices on those. Wow, it would be great to have this. And there might be, a half dozen, 12 that you can include and get pricing for to see where your bidding ends up. And then you can make a decision there. Again, if you do well on the bidding, it comes out better. We can add back in a couple of these really things that would be nice to have and still be on target with the budget.
Okay, and that doesn't mess up kind of, hey, we printed the ed spec that was submitted with the grant, and now we're doing something a little different. It's not like we're locked into the.
No.
Okay.
I mean, there's a difference between the number of classrooms and sizes and things. I'm thinking of, sometimes athletic field. You may not get the same reimbursement, your standard reimbursement, but
Right.
again, you can make those decisions,
Okay.
down the
Yeah.
road.
Yep.
Okay. Go ahead.
Another something that I really liked in option 3 when looking at it too, and thinking about community use and community space. We know it's a premium in Cromwell. I think that layout just really lends itself to our community being able to use these spaces, while also protecting the academic areas, allowing student maybe long-term work to stay out and not worrying about that being vandalized. There's great proximity with the gym to the soccer field and locker rooms for recreation, and then obviously the way the arts area is laid out for different performing arts companies too. So I think that just that layout I think is, works really well, because you can think about it when you don't have these existing walls. So.
So last week, when we were looking at the three different options, I was all in on option 2. And because I just couldn't justify a $7 million difference. But now we've got a $3 million difference, and, with the way things go, that it may not be so different. And I think what Tecton did, they made some huge improvements to option 3 by putting all the major spaces on one side and being able to separate the academic side from the community side easily. You definitely would have gotten there anyway, but I just thought that was a huge improvement. I was still trying to justify this $3 million difference, and I was kind of hoping, well, maybe if we had some higher rebates on one side, that may get us there, but we're not going to get $3 million in rebates. We're really talking pennies. So I was surprised. I came in thinking I was going to vote for option 2, but I think I'm all in on a new building.
Yeah.
I would add,
Oh, go ahead.
I would advocate for new construction as well. And one of the driving factors is, in the new, you're going to get you're going to maximize your dollar for what you're putting into the building. You're going to lose anywhere from $1 million to $2 million in a reno on costs. I don't know the term you use, but you're not getting any benefit to the community. It's the process to get there that you're expending funds on. I've been through multiple building projects in my career, and the disruption in phasing projects, it's felt by the administration, it's felt by the teaching staff, and it's impacting the student learning. One of the comments was, you're going to be losing the auditorium, you're going to lose gymnasiums for a period of time. All that's going to impact, and it's also going to add another year, so you're impacting 3 grades going through over the course of the project. New, you build it on site, you have one move, you move in to a new facility, minimal disruption. There will be noise, there will be dust as indicated, but that's also part of the phasing of a construction project. You try to do footings, foundations, and steel work during the summer, and then you start to close in your envelope and you work from there on the interior, greatly reducing the amount of noise. And if you have an internal, and I've seen it, you close off hallways and everything else, you're still going to have a lot more destruction with a reno for the staff and students while you're occupied than you would in a new construction project. So everything in consideration, I would say I would vote for the new.
And you said 2 years for option 3, but it's really 2 years from to the point where the fields and the parking and everything's done, right? Students would probably be able to move in earlier into the new building while we just tear down this building, or no?
Possibly. We've built similar buildings before, actually with CSG, similar size buildings in 14 months. So we put 24 months there to finish, taking down the existing building, finishing the fields, finishing the parking, that kind of stuff.
So it's like groundbreaking to your, was it letter of occupancy? Is that what it is? The official like
substantial
letters.
completion, right? You got it. Yeah.
Thank you. Certificate of occupancy. Okay.
Just keeping in mind that we're a public service, we're servicing kids all day long, so if you have someone running from one, even though it's right here, you're taking away services. I think that's what you were asking, like, can we start to occupy that building with students? And then,
No,
oh, I'm
I was
sorry,
saying,
misunderstood. I'm like,
yeah, I was
"Why
talking,
do that?"
no, I was talking more about like this, the new building gets built, and then they have to tear down this building. So, well, obviously you'd have to use the new building. You don't have to wait for anything, like,
okay.
like it
Oh,
doesn't,
I
the
missed
timing
my
doesn't have to be
question.
like you have to wait to the summer and, and well, they can move in. I guess is what I'm getting at. Okay.
And for WIS, they'd moved in the middle of the year for 3rd and 4th grade when WIS opened.
Oh,
It opened in January.
That must have been
And
fun
then they
for
moved the
those
5th
kids.
grade in the following fall.
Where were they beforehand? with
Fifth
students?
grade was here,
Oh, really?
and ECS was K through 4.
Oh, okay. Wow.
I was there. I was one of the first fifth grade teachers to move in. Just, if you want to put that on my resume.
Lucky.
Can I just add, in addition to the students being affected and having gone through COVID and that educational kind of downslope that we've seen, I just want to mention too the teachers here. I can't imagine being a teacher going through COVID with all those changes and distance learning and having to keep your students 6 feet apart and all those stresses, and then almost immediately now going into a school in construction. Like, I can't even fathom.
Right.
Blaze, you can probably speak to it too, but I can't even imagine the stress level of teachers and administration going from COVID to a construction project.
Does that sound very stressful to you, please?
We're fine. We're all fine. We look perfect.
Start twitching.
We're just fine.
Yeah, my hair was brown 2 years ago.
We're fine.
Aw. Okay. Any other comments?
Yeah, I was leaning towards option 2 when I came here as well. And after hearing how much money we're wasting with option 2, over $2 million, and it opened my eyes with the safety factor as well, which I missed on the first time around. But I like the safety factor of option 3 as well. That was my number one concern. It's always
Yep.
been.
Yeah.
In my line of business, my job is to keep kids safe, and that's why it's my number one concern. After that, STEAM. But and I also, it breaks my heart to see that a child 2 years ago went through COVID, and that has to go through 3 years of construction, and that was a major factor for me too. So I'm leaning towards option 3 now as well.
Okay. Well, are we ready to take a vote on it? Okay. Is there a motion to approve option 3?
I'll make a motion to approve
Thank you,
option
Blaze.
3.
Is someone to second it?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ken. All in favor with a show of hands this time, just to get an official count of option 3 as our go-forward plan. Please raise your hand. It's unanimous. Option 3 it is. We all clap? Let's clap. That's a big decision. That was a big decision. And a very exciting one as well. All right. We do have 2 more actions on our agenda. Approval of the building committee schedule. I did want to make one change that we can vote on for next week, if we can move the meeting to Tuesday as opposed to Wednesday.
I'll make a motion to move the meeting to Tuesday.
Can anyone second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We can't?
Oh.
They have a meeting, a board meeting.
So we have a board meeting on Tuesday at 6:30. We have a training.
Yeah.
So we're meeting at 5:30.
So we can't have it.
Show the specs again, and then to vote on those specs. Meeting on Tuesday.
We can't do it when you have your thing?
Because it was going to be moved to the high school for
Oh,
the next meeting.
shoot.
That's why.
Because we have 2 of us are not going to be here Wednesday, so we need to move our meeting.
I mean,
3 of us.
Can we do it
Oh.
you
beforehand?
could do it without.
We-
Everybody, I mean, it's fine.
You're just approving the specs, is it just a special meeting?
Yeah, and I wanted you there just to answer questions if the board had any, but most of them are here.
So could we just do yours and then do ours?
We have a training after,
Oh,
at
oh.
7.
Which would be another hour.
Will be another hour.
Next, wherever there's space. Yeah, you need this equipment. Or do it Monday? How about Monday? Are we free Monday?
Monday.
Let's check our calendars. Monday the 4th. Oh, no. I have RTC meeting Monday.
I mean,
Can't
are
do
there
Monday.
new business items is it okay if the committee can meet, whoever can make it can?
I feel badly, it's a special meeting, so we can't make any changes. Otherwise, we could have possibly made changes, but because it's a special meeting.
And then you have training afterwards, you said? Staff training or?
For the Board of Education.
Oh.
Whichever was invited to attend.
Um,
And
c-
then we could have a meeting right after.
Can we have our,
Have
What
our meeting
time?
at 8 o'clock then?
It's LGBTQ training. It's wonderful for the entire community, so.
what kind
Oh,
of
just
training
that
is it?
meeting, special meeting on that, okay.
Rosanna, is it easier to push it back to the 13th since we don't have a meeting then? And then do the 20th following it?
13th is
Weeks rather than-
vacation week.
Oh, yeah, never mind.
Love that you guys recommended that. Right out of a teacher's mouth.
Or Friday night? Do people want to do it Friday night? I don't know if we want a Friday night
So
meeting.
can we just do it at the tail end of the
Do it
special
8
ed meeting
o'clock?
at 8 o'clock?
8 o'clock.
I don't want to.
I'm fine with that. Is that too late for everyone? 8 o'clock
On Tuesday?
on Tuesday?
That's actually better for me. That works out better.
Okay. All right.
8 a.m. on the 19th.
8 p.m. and 9, 8 p.m. So we'll do it right after, 8 o'clock, right after yours.
Yeah, we'll be at the high school.
Be at the high school anyway.
That's where you're, yeah.
Okay. So is there a motion to approve the agenda with the change of moving next week's meeting to Tuesday at 8 p.m. at the high school? Thank you, John. And is there a second on that motion?
I'll second.
Thank you, Matt. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All not in favor, say nay. There's one nay. The ayes have it. Meeting moved. All right. And the last thing was approval of the CMS Communication Subcommittee meeting
Oh.
schedule.
Actually, before that, was this something that TechCom provided? Sorry, I don't have any background to this page. General construction, 2019, 2020, Canterbury through Cromwell. This thing, Lisa?
What was that?
Who asked?
Did I ask? I asked you to do that?
Was that on the email?
I don't recall. I don't even know what this is. It's the reimbursement rate?
Yeah, this
Oh.
is part of, today what we got from,
Oh,
Jeff
okay.
included it. Just
What's-
Okay, all right.
what the re-
By year? Like,
Very
We
nice.
did different projects? Okay.
Oh, very nice.
All right, that's fine.
Okay, that's fine.
Sorry.
Everyone should also have the subcommittee schedule handed out to them. This is your meetings, right? Yep. Does anyone want a motion to approve the subcommittee schedule?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Ken, all in favor say aye. All opposed say nay. Okay, schedule approved. At this point, I will offer up for any additional public comments, if anyone wants. Go ahead, Jason.
Okay, I'll try and make this quick. So for option 2R, just for your guys' record, a regulation field is 115 yards by 75 yards. So when you're looking at your spacing, please consider that. And you would need at least a minimum of 5-yard buffer around the entire perimeter, so you guys can do the math. For option 2R, the current parking that's here is also used extensively by the baseball community. And it looks like you guys have eliminated or moved that up the side there. I don't know if there's a way to bring this back up, but you might want to consider extending that parking lot back down and maybe moving the bus loop over a little bit to maintain the amount of parking that's there, because it's used quite a bit. For option 3R, same thing on the field dimensions, so include the buffer when you do that. For that configuration, for any soccer field, I think you would need a 3-foot high chain link fence around the perimeter, because when the balls go out, it'll be going underneath cars and other places, so it'll stop the play considerably if it rolls all the way across the parking lot. For item number 5, I don't think that you guys would need to put that temp field for number 5. We can work with the town to find alternative space to use during the project. My point of asking last week was just to make sure that from a planning perspective, if we do go with option 3, which it seems you guys are headed that way, that we give the town enough time to take care of that plan. There was a question last week about the auditorium style, so I wanted to ask, we don't have to answer it now, if the new auditorium style is the same as the existing, i.e. sloped floors with stadium seating or not. It wasn't specified tonight. The other question, which we can answer some of the point, is do the costs that you have here include furniture, podiums, desks, and other stuff? Okay. For option 3, right now it looks like the softball field is being severely truncated. You might need to rotate that 90 degrees and then extend that opening so that the softballs aren't being hit towards the new school as opposed to away from the new school. Solar panels on the roof. I didn't hear anything about this, but would ask that this be considered. And then finally, given the impact that this new build will have on the sports facilities, I would suggest that at a minimum, Scott Curis from the Park and Rec Director be invited to these meetings so that he can provide guidance or answer any other questions you might have. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thanks, Jason. If you want to send me your questions, I'll give you answers for them. Is there anyone else in the
Yeah,
audience?
on the soccer field, so because the soccer field itself isn't in the ed spec, so that's a town field, and as part of having to move it, is it roped in as part of the project, and is it part of any amount of reimbursement?
Okay.
Is it on the school property? Is it considered separate property?
We shouldn't even have this discussion because nobody really has a great answer. I've been asking this question for the last 3 years on who owns what and what we're responsible for taking care of and who.
Well, the Park and Recs Department manages the fields.
No.
They don't?
We actually, there's a lot that the Board of Education picks up as part of our budget. We're responsible for taking care of the grounds and everything. However, we don't technically own them. So this is a very difficult, touchy topic that the town manager and I are addressing. But it's always like this. At this district, it's just very tricky, and I don't know if Tommy, you want to chime in because we take care of the property, we don't technically own it. People yell at us all the time, but we don't get any money to fund it. But technically, we do get money to fund it because it's in our budget.
We're talking about both of your soccer fields?
Yeah, it's
Everything behind the
very
school?
complicated. But Tommy can.
Yeah, I'm not going to say too much about it because it's still a little muddy.
Literally.
It's been I've heard it's been about a 20 to 30 year problem.
The town takes care of mowing the fields. There are some shared services and costs with lining the fields and stuff like that. We irrigate the fields and fix the irrigation mostly, and that's a cost on the Board of Ed. So there's shared services and blurred lines as to where everything is and where costs end up.
But
And
That's the
goal
best answer I
is-
can give you.
The goal is for the superintendent and the town manager, which we're working really hard to have everybody work together to understand Cromwell belongs to everyone, whether it be the schools or the it's everyone's. And our kids, when we say the kids playing for chill, the students playing outside for recess, they're all our kids. They all come to Cromwell Public Schools. So we have to do better at that, not just in Cromwell, but everywhere. But there's a divide, and we have to get rid of that divide because no one benefits from it when there's that divide. And so answering that question is money because there is no perfect answer for it. We just have to come to a solution that everybody can live with. And it, like I said, in talking to town manager Salvatore, he inherited that, and I've inherited it, and it's been going on for years. And it's just really trying to get everybody on the same page because there's 15,000 residents and 2,000 students, and you own all of it. So how do we all work better together instead of pointing fingers and blaming each other and saying, it's not my responsibility or it's the other person's responsibility. That's a bigger picture and a bigger conversation, and hopefully we can get somewhere soon. But having that discussion will bring us to no end because it's just very confusing,
Sure.
and no one really has an answer.
So Karen, in terms of the ed spec, do we need to verify that the soccer field is part of our campus? And if it is, would we have to include it in the ed spec?
We don't have to. What will happen is we need to define, and we'll dig a little bit deeper, and I've started pulling records for the grant application and see, what the mapping shows. And if, hypothetically, if the fields are not on the school property, then they're not considered in the project scope as far as the state is concerned, so there would be no reimbursement. But again, I've started, looking up the record, the FEMA maps and the GIS maps and see what's on file, or if more than one thing is, and we'll have to continue to discuss that. But the state will be looking for it to be part of the school property or defined.
Yeah, so there's a subtle distinction between this week's site plans and last week's site plans. There's a yellow line and it's shaded differently. So that represents the property line off of the town's GIS website. So if there's more information that we don't know about, that's where we got that information from. And so that answers the property line question. If there's something in addition to the GIS, then please let us know. And then as far as the areas that were included in our estimates are, if we're disturbing a spot like in option 3 where we're placing it on a field and we're relocating it, we carried the associated costs in the site detail costs. So all the other discussions relative to who takes care of what, but as far as our scope, that's what we included.
So really, it looks like the schools,
Yeah.
like for the middle school, the Board of Ed owns that property, and anytime those fields get rented out, the Board of Ed should be getting paid for that.
$0, and we pay for the porta potties too. Just saying.
Then there's,
But
That's
we
something you
all
should
live
bring-
here, and it's the
Uh,
community, so we have to change the way we think, but those are the realities.
Yeah.
Building a soccer field on what used to be where the school was.
yeah.
Sorry,
That's
Jeff.
exactly-
Yeah, so Jeff, just to clarify, you're saying the movement of Sackfield was, you're saying including the cost on a gross basis and also assumed to be reimbursable because it's in the scope and part of the school?
That's what
Okay.
that's what our information that we presented tonight is.
Yeah.
That's been our experience. It's not unusual to expect that a field that's of a soccer field size would be included for middle school physical education
Yeah.
curriculum. So.
Okay. And then if it was if we chose to build it as a turf field versus the grass, would that also qualify for reimbursement, or is there caveats?
There's caveats to that. There's differences in the reimbursement of turf fields. In fact, they may have changed the fact that they don't reimburse for them anymore.
We don't at the moment. Again, a lot has been changing at the state, but I just went through this, so at the moment, they don't reimburse for turf fields. We'll see, how that evolves, but as Jeff said, as far as, you're covering the cost in the site work for the construction, so we're covered with that. And again, I'll look, a little bit deeper, but if it's all, and see how it's, identified as the school, or is it's
Yeah,
town?
it's labeled as the town of Cromwell in the GIS. So
Yeah,
if it's
yeah,
different,
that's what Tony had said, like the whole plot of land inclusive of Watrous Park.
and that's
is
what's
part of that.
reflected in we
Yeah.
traced it. So just,
Sure.
Karen mentioned before, add alternates long-term if this project goes ahead. What you could do is you could do everything associated with the work, the fields, show it as grass. You could ask for an alternate for turf, and then you would isolate those costs, so you would know exactly what the difference is.
Yeah.
And that could be, if the state doesn't reimburse, then you'll know exactly what the town has to pay.
Okay.
Karen, at
Thanks.
the town council today, they're talking about some issues at the state now with these grants. Are you aware of what's going on?
Not necessarily issues with the grants. I mean, if you've been reading the papers, they're they're investigating. There was a former director at OSCG who there were some questionable practices about how contracts were awarded and funding was allocated. So there's an investigation. So the new group that's in there, I think temporarily, of course, is being very cautious and very conservative. The previous administrator, I'll say, did a lot of things sort of off the record. And so they're just going back to going exactly by the book, which is fine with me, as long as you know, just tell us what the rules are. But I think they're also taking the time to reevaluate the rules. But I don't know of anything that would, at this point, and I'll let you know as it just keeps unfolding, as things change that would impact you. I'll certainly let you know. I think for now, they're just trying to regroup. And again, going back to, strictly what's been legislated. So I'm not aware of anything.
So they haven't put like a pause on grant applications or anything like that?
No, I'm not aware of that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Is there soccer field referenced in the educational specs? Because if it's not in the educational specs, you're not going to get any reimbursement for it, whether you go grass or whatever you do. So that needs to be looked at real quick, too.
Should we?
And I think if we're talking about site improvements, and when we go to the state and submit everything, it'll be pretty clear. And that's pretty typical for site improvements. If, I don't think they're identified, we can put that in. The soccer field will be, relocated. But I think we'll be okay with that.
Yeah, I wouldn't like to make assumptions. I'd rather just put it in writing just to make sure we cover our bases.
Well, that was hence my original question. Is it an active part of the school? Is it a resource for the school that, from the standpoint of, hey, this is a space for the students, or is it a town park? That's all I was thinking. But yeah, I think it's cleanest if we can get it in the spec, possibly reimbursed, and then, if we go the turf route, maybe we can, see can they at least reimburse up to the cost of if it were grass, and then we'll cover the rest, or maybe they're feeling generous.
I mean, if it's a town park, we're building on top of their park, so
Yeah.
hopefully it's not the case. Right, the current soccer field. But yeah, good points. Any other comments? Anything else anyone wants to bring up to the committee?
Can I just say thank you to everyone? It's not, the project obviously isn't about me, but I feel like I'm the advocate for your kids. Oh, sorry, yeah, public comment, since I'm part of the public. I don't live here though. I just want to say thank you to everyone. I know I represent all of I represent the school system, but I really truly represent all of your children and all of the staff here. And I know that you're charged with an incredible task. And I am just so grateful for your commitment to this. Whatever happens, but at least we've all put our best foot forward in doing what our students truly deserve. And I think those of you that came to Colchester the other day saw for yourselves what our students are really missing out on. And you don't really see it until you don't really get it until you see it. So I thank all of you for being fully committed and taking on subcommittee work and working day and night and having meetings on Sunday night. And I appreciate all of you for that. And Tecton, I'm not surprised in CSG. When I first met you, I knew that you could meet this deadline. I could just feel it through the room, and you did. So, and my favorite slide, of course, is Antonia's slide. It's about our kids and their social emotional well-being. So I know we have a lot of work ahead of us, and there are no promises or guarantees. But Rosanna, you've taken this on, and all of you, and I just cannot thank you enough on behalf of the students of Cromwell. They deserve it. They deserve the best. And I truly have always believed that about kids, no matter where they live, no matter where they work, no matter where I work. And let's move forward and see this through. To our board members who have continuously come out, and to the public who's come out to make sure that we get this right. I really appreciate all of you, and I just want you to know that. And I know we have a long road ahead of us, but thank you very much. I appreciate it on behalf of our kids.
Thank you.
You're doing. I know everyone thinks that too with me, but they don't realize that I make 25 cents an hour. It's a pretty big paycheck, but I work all day.
Thank you.
But thank you, everyone.
Thank you. All right, is any other last minute comments? Okay, is there a motion to adjourn? So moved. Second? All in favor? Aye. All opposed?